I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's got Paul Ryan there. Paul Ryan is a figure within the party that people trust. All the conservatives trust him. It blunts the ability of these organizations like Heritage Action or Club for Growth to just sort of say, well, John Boehner's a rhino. He's not a real Republican. He's definitely not a conservative. You know, with Ryan sort of being the quarterback, it opens it up a little bit for him. And I think also his members came out of the government shutdown very badly beaten, and they got a lot of that momentum back because of the Obamacare website problems, and none of them want to lose that. And I think, you know, these sort of confluence of events have come together to allow him to sort of become himself a little bit and say things I think he's probably wanted to say for 3 years.
It seems that way. It seems that way.
John, sitting next to Abby Huntsman and Crystal Ball, we're a long way from the tune-in, but it's great to have you here in person. And I want to pick up on that because you had, hey, we're all insider DC. There is a quote you had in an article where a GOP leadership aide said that Paul Ryan was the Jesus of the House GOP conference. And I got a two-part question here. Part of the reason why Boehner's gone so far, I totally agree with you, is because Paul Ryan, if you question his accolades within conservatism, it's blasphemy to a degree. And do you think that riled up Boehner so much, sort of saying, you got to be kidding me, this is Paul Ryan, this is a guy who we voted on 2 of his budgets, we had some unpopular cuts in there, we doubled down on that. And do you think this carries on into 2014 on an issue like immigration? Could you see, stop at Heritage, we're gonna maybe move on a piecemeal bill that you might oppose?
You know, I do think on coming out in defense of Ryan, that's absolutely true. This is the second time, in a sense, that Ryan has come to his aid. The first was with the fiscal cliff, where he broke with Eric Cantor and McCarthy and voted with Speaker Boehner. And I think this is, you know, Boehner having his back, which he really needs to, you know. And I think it remains to be seen if this translates further. It could, certainly. I mean, if they start to feel like they get this vote done, nothing happens, their members feel okay when they go home, they totally could try to use this as momentum to start moving immigration or some other smaller bills.
Luke Resser, what do you think on that?
Well,
you have a little bit of knowledge in this area yourself. We should use you while you're here.
You know, but I think that there certainly could be some precedent for that if, in fact, these guys do go home and they're not just obliterated by their constituent groups. But it's oftentimes is the people that are most vocal are the ones who care the most. And sort of the silent majority that, in fact, would probably support an immigration reform deal is often more silent. So these guys sort of freak out with the phone calls. But all I say is if Boehner is willing to bypass the Hastert rule, similar, we don't know what the vote count will be tonight, but sort of go past these groups, that could make a substantial difference with 2014, which we're already chalking up to being a lame duck year almost.
Although they're going to have to spend a month at home, which is always a problem for them.
Very problematic.
The guys go home and they get
because these outside groups rile up these folks and say go knock on the doors and say that this congressman let you down, and it's tough.
I'll tell you what, John, let me jump in here. I know you're up in New York, and I'm down here in D.C., and I've not only taken your seat, I've also been staying at your apartment.
Hanging out at the tune-in tonight? That's dangerous.
But I see your Jesus from your article, and I raise you Sun Tzu. When you look at this standoff with these groups, you think about the supreme art of war is subduing the enemy without fighting. And I wonder about applying that very ancient maxim to this fight today, because Heritage is fighting losing. And I wonder if long-term that makes them look weaker and less threatening to the Republican members that they claim to keep in line.
I think in the House it could, certainly. I think, and you're starting to see that a little bit with members. You know, they came out of the government shutdown, and there were a certain number of members who were already starting to attack them and say these guys are no good for us. But you are seeing the opposite effect right now in the Senate, which is sort of interesting. The Senate Republicans are now the ones that are saying this is a bad deal. We're going to side with Heritage. You know, you've got John Cornyn and Mitch McConnell and others who have very tough primaries in front of them, and they don't want to get the conservative base riled up against them. They want to try to keep them as close to them as possible. So.
Well, and what do you make of the fact that there are so many incumbent Republican senators who are up for election this year who are facing Tea Party primaries? I think 8 out of 12 incumbent Republican senators up for re-election in 2014 have a primary to the right. What does that say to you about the sort of status of the Tea Party today?
I think it's unclear right now. If you look at McConnell and Cornyn, I don't think that they're going to lose their primaries, but I do think that if you look at, say, Pat Roberts in Kansas or Thad Cochran, they have some legitimate challenges to them, and those can be very difficult races for them. And I think certainly in very hard red areas and hard red states, the Tea Party is still very much alive. In other parts of the country, it seems that their ability to influence Republicans at the state level, statewide level at least, has sort of diminished significantly.
I mean, look how well Cuccinelli did in the state of Virginia.
Right,
You know,
right, exactly.
For future politics, two things I find interesting. The fact that McConnell's leaning against voting no on this deal is extraordinary. We know how establishment he is. But the way in which these outside groups were quick to throw Paul Ryan under the bus was very similar to the way Marco Rubio was thrown under the bus for immigration reform. If you want to be a 2016 nominee and you're coming from Washington, D.C., the impetus on you is to not do anything. Sort of sit back and just toe the very conservative line, is it not?
Or you learn the lesson from Paul Ryan. You know, he's not backing down. He's sort of keeping out there. He's pushed back against them, whereas Rubio backed down. And you've seen his sort of stock with conservatives fall after that. Whereas Ryan is not, at least at this point, it's only been a few days, but you don't see him losing
He's not apologizing.
traction with them. He's not apologizing. It's the Mary Landrieu way, right? She's never apologized for taking money. She gets beat up on it all the time, whereas other Democrats who take money and they get afraid and try to back away from that often end up losing their elections.
Double down.
It's a really tough line to walk.
Yeah.
John Stanton, so great to have you at the table. We always enjoy it.